Hello, and welcome to A Crosstalk, a series hosted by Renew America Together, focused on fostering bipartisan dialogue, encouraging civil leadership, and healing the political divisions of our current American society. Renew America Together is a 501c3 established to minimize the effects of divisive rhetoric through bipartisan dialogue and education. My name is Lincoln Zaleski. I'm a disinformation specialist at Renew America Together and the host of A Crosstalk. This is the second episode of our series. I'm joined today by Meg Hogan, a current senior at the College of William & Mary. Meg is the founder and head of DisinfoLab, a research lab under the Global Research Institute at the College of William & Mary, dedicated to combating and raising awareness about disinformation. Meg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I think, why don't we just hop right into it? I'm going to start asking you questions. You're a very, very interesting person, very well-read person on disinformation, and that's been a big focus that we've had at Renew America Together. It's one of the things that's been historically separating our country. And so as an international relations major, let's talk a little bit about how you got your background in disinformation. There are lots of global issues you could have been focusing on. What sparked your interest in disinformation and your idea to create DisinfoLab?
Yeah, well, I think you would know, Lincoln, because you were there for it. I got interested in disinformation, specifically disinformation tactics, when I was a fellow for the Project on International Peace and Security with you in 2019 to 2020. So following the publication of my white paper, my intern at the time, Tom Plant, and I, we talked pretty at length about the need for undergraduate disinformation research at William & Mary specifically, and then increased media literacy nationally. So over quarantine, we pitched the idea to the Global Research Institute to start a disinformation lab on campus, and they funded us for a full year. So here we are.
Well, that's fantastic. We are glad to be reading all the great social media posts and all the stuff that you guys have been doing. So it's been fantastic. And if you could expand on it a little more, what are you guys seeking to accomplish? What, in your opinion, would make DisinfoLab a really successful project in the long
run? So overall, right, DisinfoLab kind of aims to inform average Americans about the threat of foreign disinformation campaigns on social media platforms, and also to improve media literacy rates across the United States. So we try to accomplish this in two ways. First, we tend to summarize on our platform and share on our platform relevant disinformation studies from academics, think tanks, government agencies, etc. And second, we contribute our own disinformation research to this field. So we've spent the past year monitoring bot activity on Twitter. So namely how these bots latch on to disinformation hashtags and how they drive Twitter trends using a database called Bot Sentinel, as well as another database called Trends24. They both have online websites. So as our lab has grown over the past year, we've found ourselves being pulled in two very different directions. So one more communications-based and the other research. So given that we're a very small lab, we've been able to balance it pretty well this year. But going forward, balancing those two priorities is going to be a little difficult, and ensuring that we can balance them, that's going to be integral to the success of our organization. And in terms of outreach, I personally think that gaining a large, diverse following that regularly engages with our content would make this project successful in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, anything with media literacy, the more diverse that you can get an audience to be, the more successful the project is. So that's great to hear that that's one of the goals, and I think you guys are well on your way to achieving it. And I have to ask, you've given us a little bit of insight into bots and Bot Sentinel and the other website. And I have to ask, what's the most surprising thing that you've learned about disinformation while studying it?
Well, prior to founding DisinfoLab, I was someone kind of from the camp of disinformation researchers who believe that increasing media literacy is really the only legitimate way to combat disinformation. And by extension, to improve media resilience in countries, the United States and others included. So while government and media institutions, right, they certainly play an important role in keeping information flows healthy and vibrant, there's no amount of journalistic integrity or anti-disinformation programming or AI or whatever that can truly meaningfully stop the spread of disinformation. That responsibility, I believed prior to um, founding DisinfoLab, that responsibility relied on ordinary people, ordinary Americans. And I'm surprised to find that since starting DisinfoLab, my convictions really haven't changed that much. Following the censoring of specifically the January 6th attack on the US Capitol with the censoring of white supremacist disinformation, DisinfoLab found that when these accounts were deleted off of Twitter and Facebook and other mainstream sites, they just migrated to other more obscure messaging platforms. So disinformation is very, very versatile. That's like the main takeaway I've had from this year working on DisinfoLab. It's not going to go away anytime soon. And to date, there's no real technological solution to solve it. So that leaves ordinary Americans to fight the fight on their own. And we need more organizations to help equip Americans with the tools and with the strategies they need to defend themselves from disinformation.
Absolutely. That's the responsibility resting on the consumers could not be more integral. And there are a number of European countries that have been trying to implement those platforms. And I know from your research and many other places that those countries have been the most successful in combating disinformation.
Mm.
So it's definitely an interesting field. And speaking of which, more organizations trying to at least bolster media literacy. At Renew America Together, we're first of all dedicated to fomenting bipartisanship and combating polarization in American society. We are also planning on launching a program soon that you can go to our website and find, is planning on kind of encouraging this bipartisan dialogue, but also teaching people how to interact with one another and communicate better as individuals. So I was wondering, could you speak a little on how your work at DisinfoLab helps with our message at Renew America Together of healing a very partisan United States?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So disinformation, as I believe you said this at the beginning of the interview, but even if you didn't, just to drive it home, disinformation drives partisanship and it foments division. And I personally believe it's a very big reason why the United States is as polarized as it is today. So in terms of DisinfoLab, one of the main tenets of our media literacy program and our media literacy training is exposure. So we regularly encourage our followers to seek out and grapple with points of view that are markedly different from their own. Because if they don't, they tend to fall victim to their own algorithm, which means they increasingly become shown via the algorithms on their Instagram feeds, Twitter, Facebook, whatever social media platform they use, an increasingly trained and specialized point of view that tends to match their own. So the less we're exposed to different viewpoints and varieties of information, the lower tends to be our tolerance for different viewpoints and the more powerful disinformation intended to divide society becomes. So if we want to heal as a nation, we need to engage with each other, even if we do not always or often or ever agree.
Well, that is exactly why we are trying to work on the bipartisan nature of this country, and I think it speaks to why disinformation research is so important, and the efforts that you guys are putting in are really key. Combating an echo chamber in general is difficult, but the fact that you guys are tackling that work on top of doing all this disinformation research is fantastic. So if we can speak a little bit to something that has been successful, this has been a little bit gloomy in terms of the outlook. Due to the hard work of our intelligence agencies, as well as heavy social media regulation and policing, we had very little foreign interference in our 2020 election. The major malign actors, Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, these countries are known for their innovative techniques, like you said, that are very adaptive to our defenses. How do you see information warfare, at least foreign disinformation, changing in the future as these actors develop new technologies and new techniques?
So for foreign actors, Russia specifically, they tended to focus their disinformation campaigns on minority communities in 2016 and especially in 2020. And while they were much less successful in this past election cycle, the lengths that they actually went for these campaigns is pretty startling. It's something that I took notice of during my time in DisinfoLab. Like last August, for example, there were around 12,000 cell phones with a Detroit area code 313. They received voting disinformation from someone who was masquerading as a Black woman, encouraging African Americans to not vote in the 2020 election. So with that specific example, branching out a bit more, I believe that as our technological defenses on social media and elsewhere increase, I could very easily see foreign actors personalizing their disinformation to the degree that we saw in 2020, if not more, right? So the forms of very personalized text messages, letters, emails, that kind of thing.
That absolutely makes sense. That's where we saw radicalization start happening.
Mm-hmm.
That before it was this kind of general online radicalization, come click on this website, and very quickly it became a very personalized form of getting people to join terrorist organizations. So that absolutely makes sense as a direction that malign actors would go. Well, this has been fantastic thus far. You've lent us plenty of insights that I think people will be dwelling on for a while. But to speak a little bit to you, and we're excited to follow your journey into the working world. And now that you've started DisinfoLab, what's next for you? What are your plans for the summer?
So I do plan on staying with DisinfoLab throughout the next academic year because my co-director, Tom, I want to support him as he becomes a senior in 2022. And, DisinfoLab is still my passion project. I'm very, very into it. I want to ensure that its longevity on William & Mary's campus. But besides DisinfoLab, this fall, I'm actually going to start work as a data analyst at Booz Allen Hamilton's Global Defense Group. So that'll be fun. I'm excited to see how that works out. Yeah.
Very exciting stuff. So the last question that I have been asking, well, this is only the second episode. So in the first episode, I asked, who is a political figure or policy figure? So someone from civic space, someone from the government, either historical or modern, that you really admire their policies and their tendencies.
Oh, that's a good question. I would probably say Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the first person that comes to my mind. She's just very big inspiration for me. My mom's a lawyer and she looked up to Ruth as well. So yeah, rest in peace.
RBG is a fantastic answer. So thank you, Meg, very much for joining us today. Lots to think about in our ever-changing world, and we look forward to seeing the success of DisinfoLab and following your journey into the working world. Stay tuned for coming episodes of A Crosstalk next month, and feel free to visit Renew America Together's website, which is linked below, for more information about bipartisanship and healing the American divide. Thank you very much.